So whether it's a podcast or whether it's a blog or whatever it may be the one to get your message out there, because the media does not go around with a microscope looking for you.
How the hell are you all doing out there in podcast land? This is the Freedom Club podcast, and I am your host, Curt Mercadante. Thanks so much for being here today, for taking part of your day to spend it with me. That means so much to me. It's so fulfilling. Wherever you're listening to this, whether it's driving in the car, listening to it at work with your headphones in, kicking back on the beach with a margarita, wherever it is, thank you so much for being here. And more importantly, I hope you are getting the value you desire and deserve from this podcast, because my vision is to save the world by helping individuals just like you live lives of freedom and fulfillment, to realize you can actually design your lifestyle instead of living a lifestyle by default. That's what this podcast is about. But it's not just about you listening. It's about actually taking massive action in your life. And when I say massive action, if you're not used to taking any action is a massive action. So I hope you get great value, but apply the lessons here to your life, because you can create your own life, which is a great segue into today's guest, Jeremy Ryan Slate. He is the host of the Create Your Own Life podcast. He's also the founder, the CEO, the head honcho at Command Your Brand Media. Jeremy's had a full life already. He received his master's degree in ancient history from Seton Hall, studied literature at Oxford. He's been a teacher. He's been in network marketing. In 2015, he started the Create Your Own Life podcast. He's had some incredible guests on that podcast. He talks about some of his favorite guests in my interview today. He's been a personal trainer. This dude, I follow him on Facebook. We're connected on Facebook. I think he was deadlifting like 600 pounds. And that was way down from where he was before. He's been a personal trainer, a marketer. He's a podcast expert. He helps place others on podcasts, helps other build up their podcasts through his Command Your Brand Media company. So Jeremy's been someone I've wanted to have on the podcast for a while. Was so grateful that he agreed to come on. Had a lot of fun with this interview. I think you'll enjoy it as well. So without further ado, here is my interview with Jeremy Ryan Slate.
Welcome to the Freedom Club podcast, where we strive to pull you out of your life of quiet desperation, out of your comfort zone of misery, and propel you into a life of freedom and fulfillment. And now, here's your host for this journey, international speaker and coach, and serial entrepreneur, Curt Mercadante.
So for those of you listening on the podcast only, we're here with Jeremy Ryan Slate. And if you were a member of the Freedom Club community, which if you are not, what the hell is wrong with you? Go to Facebook right now, search Freedom Club community. You'll see my ugly face, my very large and overgrown beard at this point. Click on that, answer a few questions. We'll let you in, and you can participate in live streams just like this one. So Jeremy, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, brother, I'm stoked to be hanging out with you today, man.
It's awesome. And we've been connected on Facebook for a while, on LinkedIn. And, you make a lot of contacts. And then it's funny, a lot of my LinkedIn contacts have moved over to Facebook. And that's where you really start to learn more about a person. And, Facebook is weird about what you see one week versus the next. But, all of a sudden, I'm connected with Jeremy, does a podcast. He's in Italy. I love going to Italy. Then the powerlifting, we talked about that, doing some crazy stuff. And then, get into your bio and the personal training and everything. So I definitely want to get into all that. Of course, podcasting, you are the podcasting maestro. But the first question I always ask my guests, and I get this out of the way because sometimes I forget, and it's the 10th question instead of the first, is what does the term freedom mean to you?
So this is interesting because I just had a post about this yesterday.
I saw your graphic and I was like, I wonder if he did that graphic because he's coming on the podcast.
So freedom to me is actually about what you do with it, right? Because if you have freedom and you do diddly, it doesn't really matter. But if you have freedom and you're figuring out how to help people, how to empower people, how to build a business, how to help others, that's real freedom to me, because then you actually have the freedom of who you're going to impact and who you're going to help.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And you're someone who is doing something a little different now than you were when you first started out, right? Because you had I often tell people that I set out to build a business when I had my agency and I built a prison instead. And you wanted to do what? MLM, right? You personal.
Oh, no, it even went before that, man. Like I was a high school teacher to start out with. I have my master's in early Roman Empire propaganda. You know, people are just lining up for careers in that niche. And I even studied at New College, Oxford, literature. And I taught high school for a couple of years, man. So that was like where I started out. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And I like got into this career for 2 years. I'm like, dear God, I hate my life. This is horrible.
You're a true Renaissance man, right?
Yeah.
Literature, powerlifting, new media, you know, you name it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what though, man, it makes it really cool because you can kind of communicate to anybody on a little bit of anything. Because it's like, I'm not an expert at a lot of things, but I know a little bit about a lot.
Interesting. That's so interesting. So growing up, is that what you really wanted to be? You wanted to be a teacher or you wanted to be 10 things?
I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had no idea what I wanted to be. I just knew I was really good at school. And that was honestly like why I went and did my master's and, you know, studied in Europe and did all that kind of stuff. Because I was like, oh, I really kind of like this thing. It was never really, and both my parents are like super blue collar. Like they didn't go to college or anything like that. So the fact that I was there was a huge deal for them. So there's like, yeah, keep going to school. And then it's kind of like, all right, well, kid, what are you going to do? And I got out and I was actually, it was in 2011. So the job situation was like horrible. And I came out with a history degree. So it's like, you're not really very applicable for a lot of different things. So I actually ended up painting houses and managing the gym, working about 16, 17 hours a day, sleeping. And that was about it.
Wow. At what point did you get into powerlifting? High school, before, younger, or later?
I was a wrestler in school. I wrestled 119. Okay. I was like skin and bones in high school, but I got into that because that was, for me, part of like our training and stuff like that for wrestling.
Okay. Wow. So you come out, you're a teacher, and you want to do about 10 different things.
Yeah.
And you try them all, right?
I actually just wanted to be famous, but apparently there's no like jobs for that.
Well, you're more on your way now, right? With your
I'm working on
the show and yeah, right. So traveling is obviously a big part of your life. Yeah. I mean, you went to Oxford. You weren't just in Italy. I like to, people's frame of reference are important. Because if your frame of reference is, well, I've been in sales for 20 years, it's hard to imagine anything different. If your frame of reference was, well, my dad worked in the factory and I'm going to work in the factory, that's your frame of reference. I feel like traveling is especially for some of us those of us in the United States, sometimes you're told, wow, this is where civilization is actually happening. We're the only ones who do it right. And then, I found myself 2 years ago walking down the streets of London and I'm like, everyone here seems pretty happy, pretty cool. They're going about their lives. It's not like, and I went to Cairo last year and I'm like, this is different, but it expanded my frame of reference to know what's possible and what people were doing. Do you find that in your travels?
Oh, 100%, man. Because I come from a small community, 5/8 of a mile. Everybody kind of listens to country music and, it's like nobody really does anything. So it's like for me, like when I studied at Oxford at 19, that was the first time I was ever on an airplane like that. So it was like kind of this big thing to be in London and live there for a bit and also, live in Oxford. And so that was interesting. I also, in 2014, we went to China for a bit. 2015, I lived in Peru for a couple months. So it's really interesting because I find that you have like not only a broader horizon, but you have more of an understanding of other people, right? Like I feel like, if you're somebody that grows up in America, especially in a small community, you have a very closed off idea of like the rest of the world is like. So you have more of this understanding, you have more reality with others. And you find that as well that like, I guess a lot of times like what we're taught about other countries, you get there and you're like, this isn't like I was told.
Right.
Like I'm not going to say that I support Chinese policy and all that kind of stuff, but when I went there, it was very different than what I was told it would be like when I got there. I'm like, this is kind of interesting and different. Okay, the guys with the machine guns, those are a little scary, but
right.
I feel like it's different in the way that it's not what we think it's going to be, and it also broadens your horizon and gives you a bigger understanding of other people.
Yeah, I thought even when we went to Europe, there's people here like, oh, I wouldn't go to Europe. Because of terrorist attacks. And then we went to Europe and, I'm not going to get a discussion of gun policy and here in the US and all that. But people there literally think it's like the Wild West. And like, oh my gosh, people are getting gunned down in the streets. It's like, well, no, not really. In certain areas, right? In certain cities and whatever. And so it's funny. I don't know if it's the propaganda of different governments. And then I went to Egypt. Now, Egypt was a place like, 7 years ago, I think, had a major revolution and some things, not cool things were happening there, right? I went there, like you said, going into my hotel. It was like a 4-star hotel. That was like $80 a night, by the way. And, anti-aircraft guns and everything. I felt incredibly safe, as if like walking down the street, I actually felt safer than I do walking in Chicago or New York, because they love America, because we pump a lot of money over there. I feel like if something had happened to me, like 100 Egyptians would have jumped in to protect me, because you know what? If something happens to one American, our tourism is dead, and and so it's.
Well, I got 2 quick stories for you around that. So when I was in Peru in 2015, there was like a mining strike in this town called Arequipa that I was staying in, and like they were ripping up the streets, they were burning stuff, they were doing all this stuff, and then one day it just stopped, and I'm like, why did it stop? They're like, oh, well, the government people pay them to riot, and they ran out of money, so they all went back to work. And I'm like, oh, really? And then in 2013, when they were all like, oh my gosh, Athens is burning, Greece is burning down, everything's going to die. I was in Greece during that time. And I'm like, so where's all the fires? They're like, oh, you see that square over there? That's where they protest. They're scheduled to do it between 9 and 5. They'll knock off after 5 and they'll all go party. And I'm like, what? It's just not like the news wants to make it out to be, man, because it's about scare you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's like during the floods, they'll show the guy from like CNN, or wherever, and the water looks like it's up to his neck, and then they pan back, and like if he had just walked 5 feet over, it was completely dry. He just happened to be like in a creek, So your podcast, is on this note of expanding your frame of reference, and we talked a little bit. It's called Create Your Life, create your own life.
Yeah.
So back up to your history teacher, right? You didn't know what you wanted to do, become a history teacher. Let's talk a little bit about your journey, because a lot of the people who listen to my podcast, people who are watching this in the live stream, some of them are 25, some of them are 45. And they're at that point where they're like, I want to do something else. I don't know what it is I want to do, or I do know what it is I want to do, and I'm a little scared to get there. I need some help. I need some guidance. So I love talking about people's stories and people's journeys, because it can help them provide clarity. And there's other people going through what I did. So you're a history teacher. And what did you like it, love it, hate it, and what caused you to? What was your path to saying I'm not doing this anymore?
Well, it's interesting, because I guess I'll preface this by saying I have one part to my story that just really doesn't fit. That at 19, I tore 3 major ligaments in my knee, and it was like a really easy surgery, and they screwed up the anesthesia, and I like got last rites and everything. So they're like, and they get done, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just want a breakfast sandwich. That's all I remember, is just wanting a breakfast sandwich. And like my life didn't change, but like literally, like they brought in the priest and everything, I almost died.
For knee surgery.
Knee surgery, and nothing changed. And I'm always like, I never see where this fits in my story, but it's like kind of like you think like people tell a story like that, like the heavens opened up and I knew what I wanted to do and I had this purpose. I had nothing, man. I just kept doing what I was doing. So like I was teaching high school and I was teaching in private school, and in New Jersey, like you don't need like a teaching certificate or anything like teaching private school. They just like put you in a room, 40 kids, they say have fun. And once in a while they check your lesson plans and make sure you're actually teaching them something. And this school had recently gotten rid of number grades and detention, suspension, and any sort of discipline whatsoever. If they showed up for basketball and football, we were in good shape because they were all state in both of those. So basically the kids had figured out that if you failed every single thing and passed one thing with a B or a C, it was enough that your GPA average would be enough that you would get a D. So they had all figured out how to pass. So nobody did anything. So I'm just every day, nobody's paying attention to me. Nobody's listening. I can't do anything about it. I'm trying to engage. I'm trying to teach them. It just was not fun. And then for me, it kind of came to a head when I had this, the largest girl I've ever seen in my entire life. Like she was 7 foot tall. She was the center on the basketball team. She didn't do her paper because I gave them a final paper that they had to do as like a percentage of their grade. And in order to fail her, I had to write her name on a piece of paper with failing and the reason why. So she walks up to the front of the room front of all the kids, crumbles it up, throws it in my face and goes, F you, man. But she said the whole word and just walked out of the room.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I call the principal's office and they say, well, is there some way you can pass her? I'm like, she didn't do anything. Like, what do you mean pass her? She didn't do anything and embarrassed me in front of the class. So it was just kind of like, it was a rough situation and I didn't really know a way out. And then during that whole time, my mom actually had a really bad stroke. And for me, it was tough because until 25, I still lived at home. Like I really loved everything I did with my parents and really had a great relationship with them. So that was extremely rough. She was in a coma for about, I think like 40 days or something like that. And, we didn't lose her, but she's lost all of her language skills, use of the right side of her body. She hasn't been able to work in, almost 10 years. So it was a very difficult situation for me. And it kind of like, it's interesting because I say that other part of my story, I don't feel like it fits, but it kind of brought me back around to that. Cause I'm like, shit, like, I'm sorry. I don't know if I can swear in here.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Swear away. Yes.
Shoot, like I don't like, wow, I almost died. Now, like I almost lost somebody really close to me. Maybe I should take a look at what I'm doing here. And it kind of took me a little bit to figure out what I was going to do. And my wife was shown a network marketing opportunity, which at that point, man, you could have showed me like, you can pick through people's garbage and resell it on eBay. And I would have been in. Like you could have showed me how to do anything. So from a small town, so I had no idea what it was. I thought I was like getting a job. Like, I'm like, oh, this is good. This looks like a great company. I'll sure hire me. What does your staff training look like? So I got into this thing and I actually did very well because I was a very motivated person. There's something brand new. I just kind of went for it. And I was making some decent money, but I got burnt out by the fact that your business was motivated by the number of people you could recruit. And you had to be the life coach to every single one of them because if things went really bad in their life, they were going to quit in their business and they didn't care because they probably had a job or something. So like, It was just not a very fun situation. So then I just went through a bunch of different things, man. I tried selling products on Amazon. I forgot to take off my $1 promo code on my website. So I lost all my product in 2.5 minutes.
Gosh.
It was so bad. And I sold life insurance. I quit doing that when an 80-year-old man told me that how could I understand anything about life being so young and kicked me out of his house? So I tried a lot of different things. And then I actually ended up working at a friend's marketing agency. And there from her help and from some YouTube videos and stuff like that, I learned to write HTML, CSS, build websites, build marketing funnels, do all that kind of stuff. And I got really darn good at it. And I'm like, all right, this is cool. I'm making money. I'm enjoying my job. I'm actually liking what I'm doing. But what am I doing for me? And that's kind of where the podcast came from, was out of that need to like do something to, I guess, make my mark on the world and also get to learn from people I was really interested in learning from.
That's cool. That's cool. So the name Create Your Life, Create Your Own Life, where did that come from? Was that the initial title when you started it?
No. So I had a podcast for about 60 days called Rock Your Life. And I made the ultimate mistake of not researching your market before you develop something. So somebody already had the name. So I had to get rid of a couple letters there and it became Rock Your Life. And it was just, it was just bad, man. Like there was no structure to it. It was me talking to my MacBook with no miking whatsoever or anything like that. It was just really bad. So I quit that about 60 days in. And it wasn't until a couple months later, I actually ended up starting Create Your Own Life. And where that comes from is I had a conversation with my dad, like after I quit teaching. And, my dad's a company guy. Like he started sweeping the floors of the company was at to working his way up to being the vice president of the company. And that's awesome for, a non-college educated guy to have done that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So to him, that was the way you do it. And when I quit my teaching job, he's kind of like, what are you doing, man? And I'm like, well, I want to create my own life. And then he was like, yeah, good luck with that. And now he's one of my biggest supporters and biggest fans. And I really actually love how our relationship has grown, but that's really what the name came out of.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that goes back to the frame of reference, right?
Yeah.
If his frame of reference, was this or that, or, we homeschool our kids and there's some people who just to them, that is completely like we could be from outer space. Because they don't know about it. And then once they see our kids, oh my gosh, our kids don't have horns. Our kids, oh, okay, cool. It's just, you expand that. So over the course of the podcast, who's been your favorite guest on the podcast?
Grant Cardone.
Really? I had a long
discussion
about Grant yesterday. It's so funny.
He's a freaking man. And it's interesting too, because like I had been turned down by his staff like 7 or 8 times for the interview. And then actually, I was volunteering at a fundraiser in New York. And my wife's like, "You're never going to believe who I'm talking to." And I'm like, "Who's that?" She's like, "Grant and Elena Cardone." She's like, "Get over here now." So she's like, "Oh, this is my husband, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh, awesome, man. What do you do?" "Oh, I have this podcast. You know, I'm really trying to talk to cool people." He goes, "That sounds awesome, man. I'd love to be on that." I'm like, "Are you serious? Your staff doesn't think so."
Did you tell him that?
Well, no, I kept that part to myself. Obviously, you don't want to make anybody feel bad. But he's like, "Yeah, this is who you're going to talk to. You're going to tell him you talked to Grant, and we're going to get this scheduled." And he ended up doing the interview. And for me, that was huge because my numbers tripled since that day and have stayed up there.
Interesting. What, that experience and whether it's, and I know some people who are podcasters, and I've gone through this where somebody will say, "Well, who do you really want to have on the podcast?" And you're afraid to just even make the ask.
Yep.
And it's interesting because one of the things Grant talks about is just asking. And my gosh, the story about how he got Elena to marry him.
Yeah.
And to agree. It was like almost borderline creepy. On him. Right. I was reading that. I'm like, this is kind of cool, but a little weird, like, oh my gosh, but hey, they're happily married, I guess. And so, yeah, that's...
And I would have been afraid too, man, because she's a competitive shooter. Like, I don't know if you knew that. Like, she's competitive with handguns. So, like, I would have been afraid, man, to pursue her too much.
Has he been the hardest to get?
Not really, because I had him at episode 154 and we're at almost 600 now. Like Seth Godin, it took me 400 episodes to get him. Like, he was the first person I reached out to, and he goes, "Oh, that's awesome. Best of luck. You get the 400 episodes. Let me know. We'll do it." And I guess he said that thinking he'd probably never hear from me again. I'm like, "Hey, Seth, 390. Let's do it." He's like, "All right." I had sent him the screenshotted email. He's like, "All right, cool. Let's do it."
That's fine.
Dave Asprey, it took me 3 years of follow up. Gosh, I'm trying to like a lot of the interviews I've had, man, it's been tons and tons and tons of follow up. I have this spreadsheet where I track everything, and I've always had an idea of who the people I want to reach out to are. So we don't always do a lot of inbound guests because most of what I'm doing are this certain group of people I've been following up with forever.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to continue doing that,
Is it what the guest that you've learned the most from?
Wow, that's deep.
That kind of blew your mind. Like, oh my God.
It kind of blew my mind because I've learned so much. I don't know if I really have to think about that. I'm going to say somebody that we both know, and that's Tim Allison.
Okay.
Because Tim showed me that it doesn't matter how large your community is, because he's from a small fishing village, you can still have a massive impact. And to me, that's incredible because I think that's empowering for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's, and I love Tim. Tim was on mine and I was on his.
Yeah.
And he, you talk about, when you talk about creating your own life, and he gave up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He gave up a lot of what other people saw as success,
right,
but he also gave up
wanted.
A lot of problems. And he talks about he said they played dirty pool, saying what you're doing to your kids is mean and it's irresponsible and all that. And he's enjoying life now, right?
Yeah.
He created his own life.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think that sometimes we have our own idea of what success is, and we have to understand that everybody's got their own individual definition of what success means. So you can't give anyone else that definition. It has to be real to you. And for him, he's living success, man. And that's awesome. For Cardone, he's living success, and his definition is very different than other people's definition. And that's what you have to kind of understand is everybody's kind of reaching for what their ideal scene is,
That's, yeah. There's a lot of people want to, Dr. Natalia Vikovsky, I don't know if you know her. She was on here and she was very successful outwardly. And she said all these people would say, "You're such a success. You're such a success." And then she would go home and, anxiety attack. She'd be to the doctor. She didn't know what was going on. She had to hit the reset button and completely change it. There's a lot of people out there, right? That especially now that they want to do a podcast.
Yeah.
And they don't because they think in their head, "Oh my gosh, podcast, it could be imposter syndrome. Who's going to want to listen to me? Oh my gosh, it's so tough to set up. How do I get into this?" What do you tell someone who has who thinks it's a delusion of grandeur just to start a podcast?
Well, I would say first and foremost, why do you want to do it? You know what I mean? Because so many people they don't know the purpose. They're just like, oh, everybody's starting a podcast. Let me start a podcast. Because that's the same guy that goes, well, let's grow our Instagram account. Let's go get more Twitter followers. And hey, I heard they're only looking at images on Facebook right now. Let's go do that. So it's the type of person that just jumps into that. Like if you're that person, don't start a podcast. You need to find out like purpose-wise, why are you doing this? Like what is the reason you're doing this? And, the next question I always really hate is, all right, so how do I monetize this thing? If you're asking me that question, you don't have the right viewpoint on it. Like your podcast should be helping you to build your business. It should be bringing in front-end leads. It should be helping you get attention. It should be helping your brand stand out and helping you create content. That should be a huge portion of what you're doing. Like you shouldn't be looking at it as something that needs to make you money or you're going to die. It should be figuring out how it can help you build your business. So to me, those are two things that I always tell people right out of the gate. And you got to be okay with sucking at first, man. Like I feel like when I did that first interview, I should have read the poor guy's Miranda rights. Like it was that rough. Like it was like, where were you born? Who are you? I had 67 different questions ready to go for the guy because I was afraid of dead air time. And here's the most interesting thing is the more interviews that I did, I learned that dead air time was some of the most valuable time on there. Because when you just stop talking after stating something, people generally say, he's being quiet. I should probably say something profound now. and you actually get some incredible things just by shutting your mouth and just hanging out. And it's because I feel like so many times we're not okay with dead air and with silence. So we have to keep filling it.
Interesting. I didn't want to respond to that. I wanted to let that hang out there for like 5 minutes.
But it's true though. I've gotten so many some of the most amazing quotes we pulled from episodes were things that I didn't even ask somebody. I just shut my mouth and waited to see if they said something.
I've heard that, the same with sales. Who was telling me the story? I think it was Fraser was telling me the story. It was either his first coach asked a guy and told the guy it was $80,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they had never asked for that much before. And there was 10 minutes of silence. And then the guy came back and said, all right, let's do it. And it was painful. It's like, shut up and just sit and wait, and
we talk ourselves out of that sale though so many times. I know with myself, some of our packages are high ticket. So you just kind of, you got to understand you're here to help somebody. You know what I mean? Don't talk yourself out of it. And a lot of times when you shut your mouth, they'll say, because they're trying to figure out, okay, so this is my ROI. This is where I'm going. They're thinking about so many different things. Just let them think for a second. And a lot of times they'll say, all right, so how do we do this? Do you send me an invoice? Do I give you my card? Like what? You'd be very surprised.
So Create Your Own Life podcast,
mm-hmm.
and you have Command Your Brand Media.
Mm-hmm.
The two are linked, certainly,
yes.
Right? And one of the big things you do is help people, and you share them all the time on Facebook, case studies of business owners, entrepreneurs that you have helped create their podcast. And, when you talk about it, you never mention about, they're monetizing. Like you said, they're doing you help give them a purpose, I guess, or you don't give them a purpose.
Well, I guess there's two halves. There's the people that we've helped with podcasts, and it's more of our training side.
Okay.
And then the delivery side, we actually help people with being guests on podcasts. So we actually operate as a PR firm coaching around that, helping them put together what's your story, message, call to action, locating the right shows, teaching content marketing around that. So we actually a full service booking firm. And that's actually most of what we do business-wise.
Really? Okay. So that's the biggest part. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
That's about 80% of our business. Only about 20% of our business is actually training people that already have a podcast. Like, hey, what do you do with this thing?
And you're not just working with celebrity authors. I mean, you're working with people who, I don't want to say normal business owners. I hate that term normal,
because here's the thing. I love to help people that are successful in their business, but they don't have the attention they want, right? Because there's if they can just get that right attention, it's not only going to be a change for their business, it's going to be a change for speaking gigs. It's going to be a change for getting featured in press and media and stuff. So that's a real sweet spot for us. Is taking somebody that's already got a successful business and getting them out there and getting attention.
That you can share any good case studies, cool wins on that front?
We helped a guy in the real estate space, and I guess I can use his name because his case studies on our website. His name's Grant Wise, and he's one of my favorite people out there. And he did $100,000 in revenue directly from 20 podcasts that we put him on. And then since he's the smartest Facebook ad guy on the planet, He did a whole retargeting campaign and did 400,000 in revenue off of his retargeting. So like getting in front of your right market and then knowing what to do with it is so important. But you know, the biggest thing, and this was huge in his appearances, is when he showed up, he was willing to talk about everything he does. Because I think so many times people get on an interview and like, well, I can't talk about this part of what I do and that part of what I do because they're going to copy it. They're going to do it. And then it's all over. But here's the thing. If you show people that you're an expert, you know what the heck you're talking about, they're going to just, the right buyer is going to be like, this is the guy I need to hire. And they were selling, I believe it was a $5,000 product at the time. So, you know, it worked for getting on the right podcast to move that. And that's what you really have to look at is part one, you're in front of this audience. Part two is what you're going to do with it. And I think that's one of the biggest things too, is realizing you have to use this media. You know, you could use it in a retargeting campaign like he did, but you could even use it as in your current funnel. You can use podcasts as like a source to show people, hey, the media is talking about me. You can remarket to your email list. There's so many different things you can do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Where do you see, you know, podcasts are relative. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but they've kind of reinvented, right? I guess because
they were kind of like going down and then went back up, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, now every celebrity has their own podcast. Conan O'Brien has one now.
Man.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, my beard is a celebrity. I just come along for the ride. Where do you see the next, 5 years of podcasting? Because as you start to talk to different podcasters, and there's a lot of, if you do a marketing campaign and you do it on Facebook or you put a video on LinkedIn, well, maybe not. LinkedIn's a bad example. Facebook or Instagram, you get or your website. The stats you get are amazing. Podcasting, I was a little bit shocked at first. They're a fraction of what you get from any other marketing side of things. You see that maturing over the next 5 years?
Here's the thing I'll say first and foremost is it depends on the show, but a lot of times, yes, numbers are lower than you think they should be, but that's because the quality of actually who's hearing you is really, really important. And I think that's important. So that's huge. And then also you have other mediums like TV and radio telling you how much their numbers are, and they don't really know. Like a lot of those are inflated. I know here in New York, Michael Kay's show and Mike Francesa have been arguing about who has more listeners here in the New York sports scene. And Mike's like, well, and Michael Kay is like, well, streams don't count. And Francesa's like, well, yes, they do. And it's like, so they really don't know how many people are listening. And the thing is, in podcasting, we actually do. And I think that's huge as well. And there's a couple different things, honestly, that we look at for a good show. We look at average ranking in iTunes is huge. Number of reviews is huge. And also checking out social media is really big as well. And based on that, you can define, the 10% of shows out there that are really worth it. And those are the shows that we really focus, myself and our clients and everything else on. So I do see this being the new big medium to go out there. And it's kind of cool too, how there's not really a governing body right now. So we can kind of do a lot of different things. Whereas with radio, I feel like it's a medium that's dying, honestly. I do. And if you even look at TV, like how a lot of that's disappearing, and like they're doing subscription services like Netflix and a lot of these different things, which I think you're going to see a lot of TV going to subscription models. And it's going to be really interesting because you're going to see television wise, some of these channels that you kind of get in your cable package, DirecTV package, and nobody actually watches them, but they just kind of hang out there because they're included. Those are going to be the ones that disappear, and you're actually going to see what people really care about. And I think that's what's cool in podcasting as well, because let's say you put out a really quality episode and your numbers are higher. Well, that's a great survey point. So now we should talk about more of that. And I think that's what's interesting as well. So you're going to see these numbers growing, but I think quality of listener is so vital. And that's what you're really getting with podcasts.
Interesting. So as you've built this company, not only the podcasting, but Command Your Brand Media.
Right.
A lot of pitching, what's your team look like? How many team members do you have? Not employees, whatever, your actual team, whether
we have 7. We have 7. Okay. That's what we've managed to do and kind of run the whole thing. And that's with me doing most of our sales and then doing a lot of like media appearances and stuff like that. But then most of the people on our team are on our booking team. And we have a process that kind of started with getting built with me, and I wrote up everything, and my team does everything just like I did. So that's super cool.
Yeah, because I just had a call earlier today, and the number one thing when I talk to entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs is that lot of us are control freaks, right? And so, especially at the beginning, you got to do everything.
It's so hard, man.
And so, I'm sure there might have come maybe not, but there was a time when you were doing way too much of everything.
That's still the case in some areas, man, where it's like, dude, step off. You know what I mean? Like I have to, because like, my team scored some really great interviews that I had nothing to do with. And that's what I need to, I've gotten better in 2019 with empowering them rather than stepping in, because they're actually way better than me, because they do it every day. Whereas I do it when, I've done it when needed.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone listening, right? Well, it's Create Your Own Life podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it. But they want to learn more about you. They want to work with you. They're like, I want some of that, what he's doing. Yeah. Where's the best place for them to go?
Absolutely. So I put together an awesome worksheet and then also a 6-day video series that goes along with it. And if you head over to commandyourbrand.media/checklist, it's going to take you through all that. You'll get access to all that, because I know that appearing on podcasts can change your business. It can change your standing, can really get you out there like it did just like I was Joe Nobody. And a lot of our clients have seen some amazing things happen. So I want that to happen for you. commandyourbrand.media/checklist.
And the name of your podcast is Create Your Own Life. So the last question I want to ask you is this. Yep. Have you felt like you have created over the past, since you announced you're going to create your own life, since, that you have created the life that is fulfilling for you?
I literally just said this last night. I looked at my wife because we had some really big wins yesterday. I looked at my wife and I go, damn, I'm creating my own life. She goes, yeah, we are. Now about that foot massage you promised me, I'm like, okay, I'll get back to work.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Jeremy, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to put links to everything in the show notes. We'll make sure they're there. And I'll give you the last word.
Hey, if you guys are looking to get your message out there, do it, because nobody's going to come out there and look for you. So whether it's a podcast or whether it's a blog or whatever it may be the one to get your message out there, because the media does not go around with a microscope looking for you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Thank you, man.